Hello, and welcome to Selected Current News by American Moderate. The most controversial issue of the month was that infamous Helsinki meeting. That's what we'll be reporting on today. How many times have you noticed that news reported from conservative media and liberal media differ? Although everyone's entitled to their own opinion, should they not at least look at the same facts? American Moderate News is not intended to outperform organizations with larger budgets or, frankly, the eloquence of very good and persuasive speakers on both camps. But we do take reports from both sides and study the topic at hand. Then we point out holes, issues, or omissions with their arguments that we believe an audience looking for the truth would have liked to have known. Does the truth still matter? Does it matter to you? Or is winning an argument more important? Now, everyone wants to win an argument, but we believe it should start with the truth. We like to ask the question, is this a fact or an opinion? Most liberals and conservatives are good people. You know them, I know them, they're our friends. But after watching polarized news, we get sucked into believing that we need to counterbalance the other side, and reasonable people assume unreasonable positions. And that makes it more difficult for us to work together and find solutions to real problems. Now, we don't want you to stop watching or even loving your favorite talk show host. We understand there's a strong emotional attachment to them. In fact, the more polarized we become as a nation, the higher the ratings go. Hannity's show was the most watched show last month as a talk show. And Rachel Maddow is doing very well herself. But we do want to point out materially relevant facts they left out of their broadcast on the same topic. Now, it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Mark Twain. The President's Helsinki meeting with Putin and the reaction. Let's start with Hannity on the right and then go to Maddow on the left. Hannity started his opening monologue with three main questions. What's worse, what Trump did, or, and these are his claims, top officials in the FBI rig an investigation to advance their favorite candidate that they should have indicted. The Democrats rigged the primary election to support Hillary and oppose Bernie Sanders. And the Democratic Party bought and paid for Russian lies to propagandize them to the American people and to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on an opposition party during a presidential election. These are his claims. Are they facts or opinion? Let's take a look. Top officials in the FBI rigged an investigation to advance their favorite candidate that they should have indicted. As we pointed out last month during our previous report on the most controversial issue of that month, the Department of Justice's Inspector General's audit of the FBI investigation, Hannity stated that there were several reasons, but three main reasons as proof of this bias. He said there was exoneration before investigation, that the text from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page was proof the investigation was biased, and that there was political bias in the FBI, and that bias was for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump. Let's take a look at that. First of all, the claim that there was exoneration before investigation comes from the fact that the FBI began drafting the conclusions to that investigation before they actually met candidate Clinton. This is standard operating procedure on very important cases that the FBI handles. It wasn't handled any different for Hillary. Not in terms of the beginning of the draft. Keep in mind that the investigation had been going on for about a year by 20 dedicated investigators and prosecutors dedicated to the case, and they were all coming up with the same answer. There was no prosecutable case. So the claim that exoneration happened before the investigation is simply not true. Keep in mind that it's normal investigative procedure for investigators to try to gather as much information as possible before they meet with the subject of the investigation. In that way, they can catch the subject in a lie. And by the way, as we stated before, this does not mean that Hillary Clinton didn't lie or failed to provide information. It simply means that the FBI had no prosecutable case because they didn't catch her in a lie. So that claim is simply false. It is standard investigative procedure for the FBI to do that. The next claim, that the text from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page was proof the investigation was biased, is something we actually praised Hannity for bringing it to people's attention, like the other media did. Peter Strzok had an illustrious career of service for 20 years, and he had put away sleeper cells and other enemies of our country. But it looks like he got a little bit too large for himself, and he made a bold statement to his girlfriend, a personal statement, yes, but incredibly unprofessional when he's one of the investigators. And so we salute Hannity for bringing that up. Peter Strzok made a terrible mistake. It has hurt the credibility of the FBI, and it's probably the most damaging thing that has happened to the FBI in a long, long time. So we praise Hannity for that. But we fault Hannity for failing to point out the following, which was stated on the very same report which he's quoting from, the Inspector General's report. On the same page where Peter Strzok's text message was exposed, the Department of Justice, the Inspector General, stated a few things that Hannity completely left out of his report. Number one, Peter Strzok never was the sole decision maker on any of the investigative decisions for the Hillary Clinton email probe. So even if he had wanted to change the course, which he denies, of the investigation, he couldn't have. There were too many people involved. Number two, these texts that they're talking about were actually made when the focus of the investigation had shifted from the Clinton email probe to the Russian investigation, which was a referral from the intelligence community. That's relevant too. Peter Strzok made a terrible mistake. We're not trying to make excuses for that. We don't understand why he is still employed with the FBI. But the fact that to imply that because Peter Strzok made a personal text to his girlfriend, which showed that he didn't like Trump, certainly doesn't show that he likes Hillary. One of the things that came up as a result of the investigation is that Peter Strzok was going to vote Republican. He didn't like Bernie Sanders, he didn't like Hillary Clinton, and he obviously didn't like Trump. He was planning to vote for John Kasich. So there was no love for Hillary Clinton from Peter Strzok. So that claim is basically lying by omission. Hannity left out the fact that Peter Strzok sent those texts after the focus had shifted to what was his specialty, which was counterintelligence, not the Clinton email probe. And he also left out the fact that Peter Strzok actually advocating using stronger measures than others in his group against Hillary Clinton, such as the use of grand jury subpoenas. Peter Strzok was no fan of Hillary Clinton. And that's relevant. So that claim is false. And then there was the claim that there was political bias in the FBI, and that bias was for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump. What the Inspector General found, besides this incredibly unprofessional and foolish text from Peter Strzok to his girlfriend, was that the only thing that was truly unusual was Director Comey's behavior. It was insubordinate, and it was unusual and against policy to essentially trash the subject of an investigation which he and every prosecutor agreed did not warrant prosecution. This is also not true. There was never political bias for Hillary Clinton within the FBI. Now, we caution all Americans to be very careful here. To dislike or even hate candidate Hillary Clinton is perfectly valid and understandable. But to take a strong dislike for an individual and make the leap that since the FBI did not indict her, therefore the FBI is biased and therefore not trust our own law enforcement institutions is very dangerous. Keep in mind, Inspector General's review of the FBI cleared them of political bias. They found their decisions were reasonable. The only thing they found unusual was how harsh Comey was on Clinton, even though they did not indict her. To suggest that the FBI, led by a Republican at the time, was biased despite the fact that 20 prosecutors and investigators, as well as the director of the FBI, unanimously agreed there was no prosecutable case, is making Republicans take a leap to an uncomfortable and unfamiliar place. The party of law and order is doubting and undermining our own institutions of law. The director or the head of the Department of Justice is a Republican appointed by President Trump. The Deputy Attorney General is a lifelong Republican appointed by President Trump. Comey's replacement is a Republican, Christopher Wray, also appointed by President Trump. And Trey Gowdy, Congressman Trey Gowdy, who is no fan of Hillary Clinton and conducted the Benghazi investigation against her, has stated that Christopher Wray is the right man to write the issues the Inspector General's report did find on the investigation. All three of the men involved in this action are Republicans appointed by President Donald J. Trump. Keep that in mind, because they have all accepted the report by the Inspector General that there was no political bias in the investigation. Hannity's claim that top officials in the FBI rigged an investigation to advance their favorite candidate that they should have indicted is not only false, but is laced with partisan mistrust and hatred that has helped his ratings and him personally, but does a disservice to our law enforcement agencies. The FBI was no fan of Hillary Clinton. The Inspector General's report and the new FBI Director, Christopher Wray, who Congressman Gowdy says is the right guy to fix the faults in the report, admits there were issues they will need to fix, but accepts and supports the IG's unbiased review of the FBI's investigation. We can and should trust the 35,000 men and women of the FBI as they collectively work to keep us safe. To attack the credibility of the FBI without valid reasons undermines our democracy. Hannity made a second claim. The Democrats rigged their primary election to support Hillary Clinton and oppose Bernie Sanders. This claim is true. It has become evident beyond question that there were several Democrats that tried to put their finger on the scales to help Clinton at the expense of Sanders. We agree with Hannity on that fact, and the fact that this was absolutely wrong. The Democratic Party allowed a Democratic socialist to participate in their primary, and we believe that was a mistake. In retrospect, a socialist should have run as an independent or third party. As Sanders gained on the polls, many Democrats panicked. They should have been fair, but there were multiple examples where they just weren't. Hannity was right to point this out, but this problem is one with the Democratic Party making a bad choice during the primary and then trying to fix it, and not our institutions of law enforcement. We believe that Sanders supporters learned this, and this caused them not to support Clinton, and in many cases voted for then-candidate Trump. Some reports suggest that over 10% of Sanders supporters actually turned and voted for candidate Trump. Number 3, the Democratic Party bought and paid for Russian lies to propagandize them to the American people and to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on an opposition party during a presidential election. There has been so much said about this topic that we believe a little perspective is warranted. Let's start with this. The only congressman in the House Intelligence Committee that has read that infamous FISA warrant, and that is not Nunes, or other than Mr. Gowdy, a fierce critic of Hillary Clinton, that conducted the Benghazi investigation and closed it without indictments after the election. We believe it is reckless and sensationalist of Hannity to make this claim, since he does not have the security clearance to review these documents, and those that do not side with his view of what happened. This claim is false. While we believe it is a fact that most politicians try to dig up dirt on a political opponent, and both parties do it every election to our disgust, the partial information we have from statements from the Deputy Attorney General is that there were several reliable sources providing information that made it clear there was a foreign government trying to infiltrate our democratic process, and that they had reached out to several key players to build human assets. To not have monitored people after obtaining a FISA warrant would have been a national security threat. It is now clear that threat came from Russia, and that they wanted to help President Trump win. What the reason is, we don't know. Further, for Hannity's statement to be true, There would not only have to be a court order to allow intelligence gathering from our intelligence community, but then also an expectation that several of the brave men and women that protect us from sleeper cells and other threats, and whose names we may never know, are also traitors to their institutions and our nation. And all this to help Clinton win. All of them? We're talking about hundreds of Americans with top secret clearances that have been serving our nation, many of them for decades and with distinction. We patently reject that notion and fault Hannity for propagating these conspiracy theories against our agents and investigators. If he has the names of the people that did this, which is what it would take to prove his claim, he should provide them. The fact is he does not, because they don't exist. Neither the Republican nor Democratic Party control FISA, the courts, or the FBI. The entire intelligence community has stated they have proof Russia interfered in our elections. At this point, there can be no doubt that Russia attacked our democratic process and engaged in a coordinated cyber, human, and social media attack designed to help President Trump win the election. Trey Gowdy, a fierce Clinton critic, as well as the vast majority of Congress and every single head of our intelligence community and their operatives, agree this is exactly what happened. Does this mean there was collusion? No, we don't know that. There's currently an investigation by a special prosecutor to determine that. At this point, you may be wondering, what do comments by Hannity have to do with what the president said at Helsinki, while standing next to Vladimir Putin, a former KGB intelligence officer who attacked our democratic process, and as the president of the Russian Federation has ordered the assassination of British nationals on their soil and illegally seized Crimea by military force? Well, let's take a look at the video.
Okay. The final question from the United States will go to Jonathan Lemire from the AP.
Thank you. Question for each president. President Trump, please, you first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer. Okay, thank you.
The President of the United States had an opportunity to stand strong against Russian aggression in the global stage. Sadly, he chose to try to deflect the question and brought up an old but reliable punching bag, Hillary Clinton. What did she have to do with the Russians attacking our democratic process to help Trump win? Nothing. In the end, he hinted that he believed Putin over our own intelligence services. That is what happened. Those are the facts. And all the other comments from Hannity were a distraction from these facts. Now, Hannity rightly pointed out that President Trump has many times stated that it was probably Russia, but maybe others as well. The problem is that it was certainly Russia. And while he had stated something along those lines before, when he was at an international setting with the world watching, he looked weak and confused. Hannity rightly claimed that the two largest nuclear powers should try to establish diplomatic relations. But that is not why many Americans were outraged by Trump's comments. No one was outraged by the fact that they met. Even Ronald Reagan knew they needed to have diplomatic relations with the Russians, but he also understood that to make gains on the Russians, we needed to act from a position of strength. The Berlin Wall crumbled not because we were friendly to the Russians, but because we stood up to them. Hannity then moved on to attack liberals that were critical of the president's performance. But it wasn't just liberals that were critical. John McCain, Republican senator, Vietnam War veteran, and I quote, "one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president in memory." Mitch McConnell, "I have said a number of times, I'll say it again, the Russians are not our friends, and I entirely believe the assessment of our intelligence community." Paul Ryan, Republican Speaker of the House, "There is no question that Russia interfered in our election and continues attempts to undermine democracy here and around the world," he said. "The United States must be focused on holding Russia accountable and putting an end to its vile attacks on democracy." Conclusion on the right, as presented by Hannity. Hannity makes valid points on the Democratic Party's primary disaster, and in our view, which is an opinion, not a fact, brings up valid points about democratic hypocrisy, but makes statements about the FBI that are patently false and hurting the credibility of our institutions of law by presenting opinions as facts that can easily be refuted by reading the Inspector General's report, which is available online. But we also ask, why is Hannity bringing this up now? We believe, and this is an opinion, not a fact, that he's trying to protect the POTUS from a terrible answer he gave in the world stage. Since Hannity is not a news anchor, but an opinion talk show host, we don't hold him to the same standard as someone like Shepard Smith, who is a reporter. But his opinion is stated and taken as a fact by many in his audience, and this undermines our law enforcement institutions. And now the left with Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow started her show saying that Americans should consider the worst case scenario. Rachel Maddow also made comments on her show after the Helsinki meeting. She stated that Americans needed to prepare for the worst case scenario. And that scenario is that we have never had to reckon with the possibility that somebody has ascended to the presidency of the United States to help the interests of another country rather than our own. While the President of the United States has made unusually harsh comments against our allies in Mexico, Canada, and the European Union, we cannot assume that this is being done to further create a world order that better suits the Russian Federation. Rachel Maddow is suggesting that the President of the United States may be an asset of Vladimir Putin and provide some random items that have nothing to do with the meeting. She's displayed the fact, and we know this, the fact that 12 Russian agents were indicted in a Mueller investigation. And this indictment happened just as the president was heading out to meet with Putin. That's a fact. But that doesn't say anything about the meeting. She also points out that not only liberals, the CNN, AP, but also other media, including Reuters, NPR, and Fox News, all were very critical of the president's performance. But that doesn't prove that he's a traitor. She also put this slide in, which was interesting because it was provided by the Russian Foreign Ministry, since President Trump did not allow reporters, American reporters, in that meeting. And it's very suggestive. But let's keep in mind, which she did not point out, that in that room was an American that most of us trust, General H.R. McMaster's. And after that meeting, General McMaster came out and said there was nothing inappropriate reported in the meeting to the Russians. Then she went to this slide and showed us Mr. Manafort, who is now in jail, and his trial is currently ongoing. And she also showed us this. This woman is a Russian agent that was posing as a guns advocate for gun rights in Russia. This made her get close to the NRA and people that are supportive of the NRA. The FBI's investigation has further revealed that Butina, this lady, and the Russian official took steps to develop relationships with American politicians in order to establish private, or as she called them, back-channel lines of communication. These lines could be used by the Russian Federation to penetrate the United States national decision-making apparatus to advance the agenda of the Russian Federation. These are facts, but they don't tie her to President Trump. Well, there's no question that the Russian Federation infiltrated our electoral process with a sophisticated attack using human, social media, and various electronic techniques to steal files and sway our opinion. There has not been any evidence presented, at least not yet, that the Trump campaign was involved. While it is a fact that the President of the United States' son-in-law, and his campaign manager, who's now in jail, did meet with a Russian agent that wanted to provide dirt on Clinton, which we learned from the Free Press, there's no evidence, at least not yet, that Trump colluded or gave the Russians anything. And once again, what does this have to do with the Helsinki meeting? Not much. After looking at the facts and reviewing President Trump's sensitivity to his critics saying he did not win the election fairly, it would be a distinct possibility, and we admit this is an opinion, not a fact, that the President of the United States simply did not want to suggest to the world that he had not won the 2016 presidential election on his own because of the Russians, even as Putin admitted they wanted him to win. We don't see the meeting as an act of treason, but we do believe it was a terrible answer to the last question of the day. The President of the United States made a mistake. He should have seized the opportunity to strongly condemn Russia's interference in our election and warn that any such actions would be met with American resolve to bring the perpetrators to justice. Instead, he seemed to us to be more focused on how it would make him look if he admitted the Russians did attack our democracy to help him win. We believe, and it is an opinion, not a fact, that both Hannity and Maddow are benefiting from the polarization of our country. Both of the ratings have gone up as they continue to make suggestions of a complete breakdown of our government, and both are peddling conspiracy theories. Hannity has been attacking the deep state, whatever that means, and more worryingly, the FBI, the CIA, and the intelligence services, while they were led by the other guys. Our intelligence services are not run on a political basis. They are not Democrats or Republicans when they put on their work hats. They represent the nation. Maddow is suggesting that the President of the United States is a traitor, and yet provides no concrete evidence of that. Regardless of how we feel about the President of the United States, we should give him and his staff the benefit of the doubt. There's currently a special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, conducting a full investigation on Russian interference in our election. This man is the one of the few men that has the respect of both Democrats and Republicans, and has a distinguished record as a public servant and a veteran in Vietnam. If he can't find anything on collusion, then we believe liberals should simply accept the fact that there's nothing there. But if he does find collusion, which would constitute a betrayal of our nation, conservatives should reject anyone that's involved. We hope we pointed out information you found relevant that was not provided from your favorite talk show host. Further, we hope it clarified some of the misconceptions, if any, you had. We sincerely believe that an effective democracy requires trust and compromise, truth and compromise. Our goal is to help people come to a place where we can move forward together and do so with mutual respect towards the other Americans and our institutions of law. Thank you for watching.